Kia ora, bula, talofa, malualele, kia rana, and welcome to Tubalingi in a Piece and Easy Pod. My name's Glenn Murphy. I'm based here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and it's a pleasure to be here with Dave talking about great business stories across the Pacific.
And good fala morning, lo you fala olgeta. I'm Dave Dewar, previously based in Suva, Fiji, currently based normally in Rarotonga, Cook Islands, and dialing in today from Te Awa Kairangi, the mighty Hutt Valley, where I'm home, returning to do a bit of catching up with friends and family here. So also dialing in from Aotearoa. Glenn and I have been working, however, for the past 5 years across the Pacific. We've loved working with businesses to help them understand the opportunities in this part of the world, and we're really excited to be doing that again through this weekly podcast.
And in this episode, Dave goes solo and talks to the wonderful Saili and Janina Wetzel and talks about their business and how they've developed things across a number of Pacific nations now. Fascinating interview, Dave, and certainly look forward to getting into that in a moment. But we also had a couple of really important developments across the Pacific or that affect the Pacific this week. One, of course, was the Honolulu summit that we've talked a little bit about over the last couple of weeks. In fact, you broke the news of it on this podcast a couple of weeks back, and then a couple of announcements about the COP events that are going to be happening. So let's just cover those quickly before I let you go off and do the Talanoa with Chris and Nina without my firm but friendly guidance. So Dave, what have you picked up about the Honolulu summit? Because it does sound like quite an interesting development.
Yeah, I think so, Glenn, and it's one that we probably will need to cover in a bit more detail in a future episode. I think at a high level, the whole purpose of the summit was a big declaration of US strategic intent. The US is back, baby, I think is kind of the key headline message. So the summit itself held in Honolulu by the State Department, that's the US Foreign Ministry, which of course has now reincorporated the aid and development function, which used to be held by the independent agency USAID, with a couple of other US government organizations there. So co-hosted by Indo-PACOM, the Indo-Pacific Command of the US Defense Force, which is headquartered in Hawaii. And also in collaboration with the East-West Center, which of course is a very significant think tank in that part of the world. But the key purpose of the summit was really to talk about development in the region, strategic development and opportunities in the region, but especially from a private sector point of view. So as we sort of talked about previously, some of those organizations that were also present are the likes of the Development Finance Corporation, the likes of US Trade and Development, and the Millennium Challenge Corporation, all run interestingly slightly different models of catalyzing economic development across the region. So really their aim is to work with predominantly US companies, but other private businesses to see how they can unlock strategic opportunities. And so, of course, you had a lot of private businesses at the event as well. You know, the Starlinks, the Googles, the Amazons, big focus on digital technology and strategic digital infrastructure, and a lot of announcements coming out of it around not so much actual projects, but opportunities for Pacific leaders to learn a little bit more, to probably go to the US on a few government missions, to learn a bit more about how those companies can deliver economic outcomes in the region.
Yeah, I think the two things that I particularly took note of in terms of outcomes was the comment that there were at least 80 private sector organizations involved across a number of sectors from the US. And the second thing I really took note of was the strong kind of emphasis from Pacific leaders that were there that the development and the funding and things that happen need to be Pacific-led.
Yeah, absolutely, Glenn. I mean, I think that's a very common refrain that comes out of the Pacific, and it's an exactly right sort of thing for them to be saying. You know, it's all very well to kind of come to the region with a whole lot of money and ideas about what needs to happen in the region, but ultimately it's the people that live there that need to determine what those priorities are. And so, there were a really high profile, high powered delegation of Pacific leaders and ministers that were there. I thought they gave a really strong message. You had some interesting things like, I think, the Commonwealth of Northern Marianas Islands was offering to sell an island, I think, or to get investors into that. So there were some interesting pitches made in the margins of it. We should definitely find someone who was there to have a Talanoa with us about how they find it.
Talk directly about it, yeah. And in the meantime, perhaps, Dave, we can pool our savings and buy an island together.
Maybe, yeah.
Let's come back to that, and hopefully we can find somebody who wants to talk to us more about it, who was actively involved. But the other big announcement in the week was, of course, we've talked a little bit about COP31 and the fact that is now going to be held in Turkey, with the agreement with Australia's support that the pre-events will be through the Pacific. And I just noticed the announcement that it'll be between Fiji and Tuvalu sometime in October this year in Fiji, with a special leaders component being held in Tuvalu. And also in September, there's going to be some connection to the Pacific Island Forum, which is in Palau. So, yeah, a few things going on later in the year around that as well.
Yep. You'd have to say it's a sort of a classically Pacific solution, isn't it? What started as a disagreement, perhaps, or not so much a disagreement, but a question about where people should meet to discuss these things, has ended up with everyone saying, well, look, let's go to all of those places. So great opportunity to get ministers and leaders on the ground in Fiji, take them up to Tuvalu to see what the reality is, of climate change alike in the region, and really give a reality and a context to those discussions.
Yeah. Let's get on with the big topic of this week, which is of course, your interview with Chris and Nina. There's a lot that came out of that, Dave. I think some really fascinating lessons. It was fascinating to hear their story. Importantly, how did you find it doing it alone without my firm and friendly guidance?
Yeah, we got there, Glenn. We got there eventually. I think it helps when you've got such fantastic interview subjects. So they're just incredibly awesome human beings. So Chris and Nina are both very good friends. We've known each other for a long time. They've got a fantastic business. It's grown from smallish beginnings. And of course, Chris Saili himself is from the Saili family in Samoa, which has been, real leaders in digital innovation and technology there. And it's been really cool to see kind of how Chris has, started from that business, taken it over to Solomon Islands, and then branched out from what started as kind of a vehicle tracking, use of data around vehicle fleets, and moved into drones and aerial survey. And so, the evolution of Kahuto Pacific through Solomon Islands and now back into Fiji has been a really cool one to watch, because, these drones, the aerial survey, LiDAR imagery and GIS data that they use is absolutely critical for infrastructure across the region. It was just really, really fantastic to sit down with them both to talk about the realities of starting and running a small but growing business as a husband and wife team. And, some of the lessons that they had around, how to do business effectively and grow a business in the Pacific.
Yeah, and I think those lessons came out pretty clearly and are very broadly applicable to any business, I think, that's thinking about entering or is already engaged in the Pacific. So let's go to that Talanoa now, Dave, and see how you got on without me.
So, Chris and Nina, it's awesome to have you with us today on the podcast. Last week, we were talking about businesses that have worked with the ADB. And I was really keen to profile a business like yours, actually, which I know from history has had quite a bit to do with the ADB. And so what we like to do on this podcast is begin by our guests talk about the background to their business and what it is that you do. And so I wonder if we could start off like that. How did you come to be where you are today, and the story of Kahuto Pacific?
Thanks, Dave, for having us. Sorry I couldn't join you last week. We had a pretty high-level meeting with the ADB president. How we got into, Kahuto would start with my own journey back to Samoa. I grew up in New Zealand, had the opportunity to go and work with my family in Samoa, a company called Sky Eye, family business that I helped get off the ground there. Working in the Pacific and with my family in Samoa, I saw an opportunity with availability of data, and it first started with an addressing system. My family had developed a GPS tracking software called Sky Eye, and to get it to function properly, we needed to create our own addressing system. There was no letterboxes or no street names that our GPS trackers could reference to. So we had to go around and physically drive outside each shop and each church and each nightclub and physically name the location so that when our GPS trackers came and turned up to visit a nightclub at 4 a.m, it would report the correct location instead of the Catholic Church where they definitely were not. So I saw an opportunity in this and spatial data and survey data being accessible, and we got into drone surveys to start with, and now we've branched out into a range of different kind of advanced remote sensing survey services.
That's cool. Well, just to be clear, because you are sitting next to your lovely wife, that idea about addressing outside nightclubs at 4 o'clock in the morning wasn't an idea that occurred to you as you emerged from the nightclub, was it?
No, definitely not. I was in Samoa for a year and a half, and while I was there with my family business, I got to meet Janina, and I guess.
Yeah, so unlike Chris always knew he wanted to start his own business and work for himself. I grew up in Samoa and come from a family of entrepreneurs as well, but I never ever thought I would be an entrepreneur or have my own business. I was dead set on having my own career, building a name for myself. And when I met Chris obviously had this grand idea that he was going to have his own business. And we obviously got married, and I kept saying to him, no, I'm going to have my own career. Like, you do your business, I'll have my own career. And then we had our first child, and then I realized to align our lives together, I couldn't have one foot in, one foot out. And at the time he kept asking me like, Nina, could you join the business? Could you help? And I was helping in the background, like with all the admin, setting up all the finance part of the businesses. But I wasn't fully committed and saying, yep, let's do this together. So it wasn't like a couple of years after, then I said, okay, let's do this properly. Let's do it together. I can obviously see you need my help to make this what it is and what it can be. And it's been about 9 years now that we've been working together.
Well, look, talk me through the timeline a bit more, because so you've started in Samoa, you've got the family Sky Eye business over there, but of course you're in Fiji right now, and you've also started a business in Solomon Islands in that time as well. So can you maybe talk us a little bit through how that's happened?
I got the opportunity to travel to the Solomon Islands through my family business, Sky Eye, to assist. It was an organics program through the Women in Business Incorporated development in Samoa, led by a wonderful lady called Andi Tawhanai. And she asked us if we could go assist them with a mission to an island out in the Western Province called Simbo. They were working with the community there to declare the island organic so that they could value add their products to improve the livelihoods of the women there. And while I was there in the Solomons, I saw a country that was coming up, a young population, and I guess the need for the services that we were delivering with the drone mapping. There was, I saw an immediate need for this type of service for that country. And while I was there, I'm talking of timelines, Nina and I got married, and I said, I think it's a great idea that we should move to the Solomons and set up a business. We were committed to, I guess, doing our best in our own interests and our own passions. And I stayed in Honiara, kind of set up Sky Eye there, and got GPS tracking was the main service at that time in Honiara. And Nina went to Maui and pursued her own interests. Nina was still helping out on the side. It was a team effort, but we were still kind of living apart at that stage. And while we were in the Solomons, I really developed a passion for the drones and the potential that drones had to play in mapping and survey, and started to develop my own drones through some friends that were living there at the time, an electrical engineer that I met. We decided it would be a great idea to try and build our own drone. The drones kind of at that time were like $30,000 US. They were very expensive, so we thought we would try and develop our own. And as all good Kiwis and Aussies do, want to have a crack at doing it ourselves. We found out very quickly there's a reason why Those drones cost $30,000 US. And yeah, we developed Kahuto and set that up in 2017 in the Solomons. The name is a Solomon Island name, Kahuto. It stands for owl. It's the name of a bird in name of an owl in the Malaita province. And I made some good friends that I was spending time with in Honiara, and I asked them what the name owl is in their language, and yeah, they said Kahuto, and that was the name. We just met the president of the ADB's, the former Japanese minister, and he asked, he's like, what is Kahuto? Like, he thought it was a Japanese name, and a lot of our web searches pull up from Japan.
I wonder if you can just talk about what Kahuto, as an initial business was looking to do. So you had that WebD project that was looking at mapping the organic nature of a particular island. In terms of your ongoing revenue stream for Kahuto in that Solomon Islands setup, where did you see the opportunity for a service of that aerial survey nature?
We were mapping organic farms. The initial purpose was to validate or to identify an inventory for a potential investor that was looking at setting up a mill in Samoa. And at the time, they didn't have any sort of numbers to inform the capacity or the potential supply. WebD came to us and asked us because we were in GPS tracking, if we could help them do an inventory and kind of what tools we would need to be able to conduct that. And they had no kind of historical records for these trees. So we proposed using drones. We'd never flown a drone before, but my uncle's a very, very savvy GIS computer science geek. And together we proposed imaging these plantations and then running the images through GIS and physically counting the trees by the air or from the photograph. And together we were able to come up with a really good comprehensive inventory report that gave us the confidence to say, hey, there's value in capturing data from imagery. That was a really painful project. I say it was like scrubbing the floor with a toothbrush. It took us months to go out and fly all those plantations. It gave us, it gave us the foundation of setting up Kahuto and the potential aerial surveys had for the Pacific and infrastructure. That was the opportunity that I saw. Like, it took too long to be able to deliver those large mapping projects with small drones. So we saw identified kind of infrastructure as a high value, project that wouldn't take so long, but the value of the data that we're delivering would help our customers a lot, and we would be able to charge well for that. And I was observing what was happening in New Zealand and Australia. There was obviously surveyors using drones and using LiDAR and photogrammetry. So pretty much learned or adopted what was happening in the developed markets and looked to deliver that in the Pacific, which no one at that time was doing.
And is that what brought you to Fiji, or did you start that in Solomons and then look to come across?
So we started in the Solomons, and because I moved from Samoa to Honiara, and we had also just gotten married as well. So it wasn't, I told Chris, we have to move.
You thought he said honeymoon, but he said Honiara. Is that what happened?
Yeah, exactly. And it was far from a honeymoon.
It's a working honeymoon.
So then we were posed with the question, where could we move? And at that time, we didn't want to go back home to Samoa, and Chris didn't want to go home to New Zealand. And so we looked to Fiji.
Yeah, Fiji was strategically, it was the center of all the islands and had the most established kind of infrastructure. We saw Fiji as an opportunity to set Kahuto up, and there was a really good landing spot for us to set up. Our first operation out of the Solomons.
And when did you do that?
It was the end of 2017, beginning of 2018.
Yeah, right before COVID. Like, this is a great idea.
What a time to start a new business. Thinking about that, what that sort of more recent journey has been like for Kahuto, I wonder if you could just sort of speak a bit about that more recent evolution of Kahuto, kind of some of the big breaks that you got, some of the big challenges you had to overcome, and where you are today. And then I also want to ask the next question, which is about your next big move with Moana Data Services.
Yeah, so we landed in Fiji, and it took some time to really kind of get some momentum going. We had to offer a lot of free work when we got here, trying to establish meaningful partnerships with reputable local partners. And we came in and identified who we wanted to be associated with and who we wanted to work with. Another fellow Kiwi, Mr. Rod Jepson, was one of those. He's a local survey. He's a stalwart of Fiji.
Wooden
He's
Gypsum.
yeah,
Yeah.
Wood and Gypsum Consultants. Yeah, it was tough to start with then, but I think working with and proving ourselves to a chosen few businesses that we wanted to kind of partner with or be associated with, that was really what set up the foundation that we have today. And so just building those meaningful relationships and proving to, locals that we were genuine partners. And Wood and Jepson are a survey company. They're well established and they could have easily seen us as competition. But I think it was through our intent and us proving to them that we could deliver work to a certain standard. It was through those kind of partnerships and those collaborations with the local companies that we were able to build a name for ourselves locally here. And that's what attracted us to some of the bigger contracts and development partners. And, you mentioned ADB. We've had the joy of going through their due diligence process, kind of how transformative that was for us.
Is that the
Yeah,
Frontier
so
Seed Program, or is that a separate
Yeah.
process?
that was the
Let's
Frontier
talk a little
Seed
bit about
Program.
the Frontier Seed Program, because that was another program that we've profiled on the podcast.
Yeah, so Marita Manley from Talanoa Consulting had mentioned ourselves, Kahuto, to Matthew Viner, who works for ADB and who launched the Frontier Seed Program. And he had come to us to learn about our business and explain to us that ADB was setting up this Frontier Seed Program. Let's hear about your business and see whether it could fit into the seed program. And when we had mentioned Kahuto Pacific and just the nature of our business, he said it wasn't going to work. And it wasn't until Chris had explained to him, actually, we want to develop this Moana Data Service where we capture data on a larger scale and deliver national scale mapping. Then Matthew said, you know what, this can actually work. And so when we first met him from 2023 up until 2025 last year, we had gone through this whole due diligence process, and it was like over a year, right? And at that time, Chris and I were very much like, it was just a mom and pop like store. And the ADB Frontier Seed Program, they allowed us to get from just me and Chris to now a legit business, to an investment ready part of our business. And they've transformed our systems, and they've essentially moved us from a drone-based mapping business to now a manned aircraft LiDAR delivery business.
The Frontier program was excellent because they were trying to find a way to help, worthy companies that were showing promise to scale to the next level. And, access to finance in the Pacific's really hard. Banks have never wanted to touch us. The biggest thing for us, the capital's been great. We've obviously been able to start the Moana Data Service, but just the confidence and having an institution partner like the ADB take us through that due diligence process, while it was hard, it really helped us become a more professional business and understanding what we need to do to scale better. They just seem well aware of our environment, our challenges. They've hired key guys that understand what we need to do to take the next step. We're really lucky that Marita made the introduction and goes back to local networks, local partnerships.
Like that, I think that's been a really common theme from what you've been talking about. Some key individuals, established members of a community who, as you said before, could have seen you as competitors, but also, actually ended up wrapping around you and being quite supportive. And I think, that's, for me, one of those sort of secrets to success in the Pacific. And it's also great to hear how how positive the experience has been with the ADB and the Frontier Seed Program. I should clarify for our listeners that we are not sponsored by the ADB. I wonder if we could just sort of tease into that Moana Data Services business model a little bit more.
The Pacific lacks access to large-scale existing or historical surveys. So there's no kind of central place that, say, someone that's building a road in Viti, there's no central place that a contractor or development partner looking to write a tender for this road to go and search. We've been operating in the Pacific now across the Solomons, Vanuatu, and Fiji, and it's not just a Fijian problem. It's a real Pacific problem, the lack of access to data. And because we were already capturing LiDAR and imagery surveys with our drone, we saw the need for the national scale maps, national scale topo, national scale imagery. And at the start, we were primarily interested in the acquisition. So we're looking at purchasing sensor, maybe a plane, and going out and actually capturing these larger scale surveys. But, when we were sitting down with the ADB, the problem wasn't data itself, but the strategic approach to where the data sits, how is it hosted, what standards should the data be collected in. And we went back to the drawing board and said, hey, we need to kind of look at what is the actual problem. Like, it's not so much getting data, there is no centralized kind of platform. And there are platforms that exist that host some of the data, but it's really fragmented across ministries and regional kind of institutions and development partners and private companies. And so we decided to replicate our good friends at LINS, not replicate, but just follow the model that they have. And we saw it working. We saw the benefits of what LINS had done and the huge development, economic, environmental, just disaster response. We saw it all working, especially after Cyclone Gabriel, and how the program managed acquisition. We dreamed to have that similar model here in Fiji and the wider Pacific. So ADB have given us a loan. It's not a grant to develop this. So there is a commercial, aspect to it. At the moment, we're just selling data as a service. So if someone is looking at doing some flood modeling in Suva, they can log onto the platform and request specific areas that they want, specific data sets. So it's a kind of a pay per area, per data set at the moment. Looking long term, our intention is to make some data available for free, and we want to try and incorporate other historical data sets that have been already captured in the islands. There's obviously risk in infrastructure, and a lot of what's happening in the Pacific, people are taking gambles with the quality of the survey and the data that they're using to design and inform many different projects.
So if you think about that, availability of data as a critical enabling foundation for just economic development across the board, it's so important not just to have it, but to have it in a place where people know where it is and can access it. And so I guess, thinking about, your own sort of, journey, what do you think the next kind of few years hold for that service?
We've started work to get this in PNG and Solomon Islands and Vanuatu. Our intent isn't to perfect it here. There's already data that's been captured across the Pacific. So essentially it's quality controlling what has been captured and verifying, the data that is existing and plugging it into the Moana platform. And our intent is to try and get it up and running and accessed by government first. They have the highest priority and need for this type of data. They also are the custodians of the data that exists in the country. We're moving around trying to find all the different fragmented silos and who owns what data set. It's really fragmented, and a lot of the conversations we've had with contractors developing infrastructure in the Pacific is they're having to go through so many different points and people and ministries. We're starting the conversation through centralizing topo and imagery data and LiDAR information.
I'm going to bring us into a close, and I'm going to ask the last question to Nina. And that is kind of thinking about the experience that you've had working with your husband across different markets in the Pacific. What would your advice be for a business from, say, New Zealand or Australia or somewhere else from around the Pacific coming in to start something new in a Pacific market?
I grew up in Samoa and Chris grew up in New Zealand. And a lot of the time I'll take the Pacific Islander view. I've seen people from overseas come into our islands. And I've always held this view where us Pacific Islanders, we need to be able to work with people coming in. And I think that's the biggest advice that Chris and I push through if people are going to come into the Pacific Islands, is to collaborate and to work on partnerships.
It's genuine partnerships. Pacific are fatigued by seeing so many people come in and out of this place, and the landscape doesn't change much here. So, businesses are well established. They've kind of seen a lot of people come in and out of this place, and genuine partnerships that show that they're interested in developing local capabilities as well. There's not an interest on what are they going to win first. Like there is for them to win, they want us to win. And I think that's the secret sauce, really.
Chris and Nina, I couldn't think of better advice to give anybody considering doing business in the Pacific. Let me thank you once again for your time and your friendship. It has been wonderful having you on the podcast. And I'm really delighted at being able to tell the Kahuto, the Moana Data Services, and your own personal stories out there. And I know there's going to be a lot of interest. So, whawhetai tele and manaka vakalevu. And I'm sure we'll be in touch again very soon.
Naka Dave, thank you.
What a fantastic Talanoa with Chris and Nina, Dave. Really interesting journey and taking some of his quotes, like scrubbing the floor with a toothbrush, just gives you a good idea of how hard it was for them when they started off and sort of getting it right. I also didn't realize the linkage with our podcast last week in terms of the ADB and that Frontier Seed Program that they've been part of. What I sort of took from that was, as much as they appreciated the capital they got as a result, actually more important to them was the confidence and professionalism they took out of it in terms of being able to build their business. But then I thought at the end, your question to them about lessons for other businesses, I mean, how just relevant and resonant is that in terms of the collaboration? Again, one of Chris's kind of quotes I liked was Pacific fatigue of seeing people coming and going the whole time.
Yeah, whawhetai lava, Chris and Nina, some incredible lessons and inspiration really to come out of that. Scrubbing the floor with a toothbrush. Well, Chris went to both Tawa College and Palmerston North Boys High, so I'm sure he has actually scrubbed a floor with a toothbrush before, so he knows what he's doing. But I couldn't agree more with that observation that he made around that that Pacific fatigue, and it's an interesting kind of sort of challenge there, right? On the one hand, relationships are so critical, and human connection is such an important part of growing and running a successful business in the region, as Chris also mentioned. But secondly, you can get so overwhelmed and having to make and sustain all of these connections, particularly with new people constantly coming through. And I think that's a really important observation for if you're a business listening in from Australia or New Zealand that may travel somewhat regularly or even rarely into the region. Well, for you that's just one trip. But for the people that you're meeting, you might be one of 20, 30, 40 people that have come through in the previous sort of quarter or previous 6 months. And, a large part of that challenge that the Pacific often faces is, that innate desire to show hospitality, to connect, and that joy that people take from connecting, having to balance that with, needing to protect their own time and their own energy. Really interesting to have that laid out, and a great nugget, I think, from both Chris and Nina.
also took a lot from the way that Chris spoke about developing genuine partnerships and kind of they had to do in Fiji when they first came in, which was giving a lot of work away for free so that they could establish their reputation, figure out who the right people were to partner with that were going to help them develop, not just come in and think they were going to get some immediate hits and be gone.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, thinking about it as an investment into community, right? You rely on community as kind of like a strategic asset for your business. It's not just customer goodwill, it's partnership, stakeholder engagement, making sure that your competitors are also your friends, because it's a small place and you all have to cooperate in a kind of an ecosystem, maybe sort of thinking about your business model in a slightly different way. But once you are part of that community and once you've demonstrated those credentials and that credibility, then people wrap around you. And it was really cool to see, some of that wisdom coming out from Chris.
Again, Dave, Vinaka for organising that discussion with them. And look, this week ahead, mate, you've got a bit of excitement coming up too. You've apart from going to your high school reunion tonight, you've got a big week ahead.
It is going to be a big week, Glenn. It's we've got the 25 years since leaving high school today, and that's a great opportunity to catch up with some of the guys from around the world for that. But on Monday, I'll be flying up to Tamaki Makaurau, your hometown of Auckland, and spending a couple of days there with some of the businesses that I've worked with closely across the Pacific. But the main event, I guess, is a briefing that we're hosting for the Vice President of the World Bank. She's in town. Her name is Janina, and she's in town speaking about some of the evolution that the World Bank has made in its own sort of approach to procurement. And we'll be briefing a lot of the large New Zealand businesses that are involved in infrastructure across the region. So that's taking place on Tuesday, and then I'm around for another day to catch up with maybe any of our listeners who might want to get in touch.
All right. Hey, well, I hope the week goes well for you, Dave. For now, would you mind reading this out?
Be very happy to, Glenn. So look, thanks everyone for listening. Whawhete lava once again to Chris, Saili, Janina, Wetzel, and the team from Kahuto Pacific. Big mihi to you guys. And thanks to everyone for tuning in, to listening to this podcast. Please keep subscribing, telling your friends, and if you have any ideas for people, options, businesses, or trends that you think we could usefully cover on this show, we'd love to hear from you. Keep sending in that feedback through LinkedIn, WhatsApp, Messenger, Viber, and of course our dedicated email address, tu.palagi, Palagi, @gmail.com. In the meantime, this has been Tu Palagi in a Pisinesi Pod for the week ending 28 February.